Steve. How are you?
I'm fine, my friend. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, real pleasure to see
Glad.
your face.
Pleasure to see yours. Yeah, I haven't seen you since since I was on I think since I went to the last one of the ACIM support meetings when you was on there. Yeah, that's the last time I saw you, I think.
Mm,
Yeah.
good old Stephanie and Lloyd. We love those
Oh, I
guys.
love them. I love them, Stephen Lloyd. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got Facebook cancelled me for no discernible reason.
Mm.
They that was a few months ago. They cancelled me. They took down my page and said that I'd offended, broken their regulations or something. They didn't specify exactly what they were. And they said I can appeal by sending them a photograph of myself, which I did, though they got at Facebook, got loads of photographs of me online. I don't know why they needed a photograph. Then they said they wanted my copy of my driving license and my American ID. And I thought, no, I'm not giving you that. I not know who you are. I'm not giving you that. So I logged out. Well, I logged out. I wasn't even on. They'd taken my page down. So I logged out and made just to let them know, no, and that's it. But I was on Facebook teaching daily for over 10 years. And I was reaching a point where I've said all I could really say on Facebook now, so I shifted over to Instagram. All my lessons are on Instagram. I did my first set of lessons on Instagram, funny enough. But they weren't sharing my posts. So I stopped bothering with them. So these days I'm just on TikTok where I'm running the lessons now till the end of the year. All the lessons are on Rumble. I just put them all on there so they're stored there. They're all on YouTube. And I do some posting on X as well, though not to the same extent. I just post memes and things on there, but it's all still about A Course of Miracles and related stuff. I don't wander off into politics or anything like that. I want to keep away from all that. God is the truth, and the truth's what I want to tell. So that's, that's where I'm at.
And how did the course come into your life?
Well, what happened was, like, when I was a young man, I'd always been questioned. I've always been one to question, and I'd sort of like wondered vaguely why I was here, what this was all about. And when my first wife, my God rest her, my first wife died of cancer 20 years ago. And prior to that, about 25 years ago, I started forming my personal theory of what the afterlife was. I didn't know anything, but it occurred, this is what my theory was at the time, that it must be to do with frequencies. Because I thought, like, if someone goes to heaven and some go to hell, it must be like some kind of radio station where the channel, the frequency, like on a radio, it'll only pick up the frequency of a certain channel, can't it? Like BBC One, well, can't pick up BBC Two because the frequency is geared to BBC One, so to speak. And I thought, well, the frequency of a good person, so to speak, goes to this heaven, and the frequency of a bad person, so to speak, goes to this channel. And that was my theory. But when my wife got ill, basically that's what it was anyway. When she got cancer, and cancer was terrible, and she used to sit and listen to me rambling away about all my theories and this, that. And about a week before she passed away, she said to me, look, okay, look, what was going to happen to me? What do you think's going to happen? I explained, well, you're a beautiful person. You'll go where beautiful persons go because you got the right frequency. And she said, well, if I can, I'll come back and tell you if you're all right.
Mm.
Well, anyway, like about 3 days after she passed, I went to the funeral parlor to see her in her coffin,
Mm.
and she was ravaged by cancer. She didn't look too good. Her neck was all swollen up, and she didn't look good. They couldn't comb her hair properly because it was falling out from the chemotherapy and all that. And it was quite a sad sight. And
Mm.
I went home, and I went into our living room, and I sat down and see in our living room, we used to sit more or less opposite each other in our chairs. And
Mm.
I said to her chair, I said, I've just been to see you in the funeral parlor. I bet you look like an angel now. And then something happened. She came out of the chair. The chair, a huge cloud of love came out of the chair and surrounded me. And I mean, this is the first time anything like this has happened in my life. It was a revelation, really, because I could feel this love. And it was almost like I felt like it was cotton wool. I could pull lumps of it off, but obviously it wasn't. But I was totally enveloped in this love, and I could hear her voice in my head saying, I love you. But
Wow.
she didn't, and it's, gosh, it was talk about ecstatic. And then it lifted off me and just drifted away. And I've come back, come back, come back. But she did tell me, no, she didn't say you were right or wrong or anything like that. But
Mm.
she told me, she had shown me that she'd gone somewhere else, and wherever it was, if this came with you, then I want to know where it was. And
Mm.
from then on, I decided to try and track down somehow and find some information where she'd gone to.
Mm.
Anyway, cut a long story short, when I was in Australia, when I finally went there, when I sold the house and went off to Australia, I bumped into a woman there called Claire Fisher, who was one of the most amazing women I've ever met. Like, you know, and we didn't have we didn't have a relationship as such. She was like, I'm an oldest kid. I was the oldest son, and I'd never had an older sister. And she really was like an annoying older sister. And but we had a bond. We had some kind of bond. And she
Right.
used to tell me all these amazing things. And I thought, she's telling the truth. I can't understand this. Where's she getting this information from? And she said, I asked her, she said, she give me a copy of the Course in Miracles. Said, this is mine. You can borrow it. Have a read. And I opened it, and I just read but a few paragraphs here and there.
Yeah.
And I just knew it was the truth.
Yeah.
There was no, let me read it now. No, I knew it was the truth. And not only did I know it was the truth, I knew I had to teach it. Because, and that's the most amazing thing, because normally you would think you'd have to read a bit and think, well, you know, I think I could teach this. No, there was none of that. I knew I had to teach it. And within a month, I was telling people this life's an illusion. You know, they were sort of saying, well, how's it an illusion? I wasn't quite good enough to tell them how an illusion. And they sort of laugh at me and stuff like that. But I'd tell them anyway, because I couldn't wait to start teaching it. And then I sent off for my own copy, which is, it's all, it's over there. I won't go and get it. If I pick it up, it'll fall apart. He said, well, I can't stick it together anymore. It's sticky tape. And, you know, and anyway, like, but anyway, I learned it so thoroughly. And I think Care passed on some time ago. It's another story though. But anyway, but it was thanks to her, she gave it to me. She passed it on to me. And years later, so we lost touch. And when she got back in touch with me, and I told her, when I wrote my book, I put her in the credits, and I found out where she was and thanked her and told her to check the book. You're in the credits, and she came back saying, "I knew I was supposed to give that to you." That was my time. She said, "I know I was supposed to give you that book." And since she's given me that book, there hasn't been a day. That was in 2010. There's not a day gone past where I haven't read it or alluded to it. And since I went on Facebook, started teaching it on Facebook in January 2010, I've taught it every day since. And even now, I'm still teaching it on TikTok. I'm absolutely devoted to it because I know it's the truth. You know, absolutely. And that's how it came about. Thank Claire Fisher, wherever she may be. God bless her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also know from our interactions and what you share on X, which for people watching who don't know is the new name for Twitter.
Yeah.
And also from conversations that you and I have had, that you take you take inspiration from quite a widespread of material as well, although the course is your primary source.
That's right. That's right. Originally, because I tried to, once I grasped it, well, as I grasped it, I understood it. I started becoming interested in the Advaita and the other Indian to see if there were similarities, and there is.
Oh God,
There's great similarities. In fact, the only difference that I had a conversation with an Indian guy. I don't know if he was a guru. I can't think what he was, but he was a follower of Advaita, and we agreed that agreed because he didn't say anything when I told him. I said, look, because he thought they tend to think that consciousness is God.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not. Consciousness isn't God. Consciousness is the ego. God is just perfect love. When you go into the perfect love of God, you don't need the consciousness because there's nothing to be conscious of. There's nothing there. And when you come out of the oneness, then you get the consciousness of the ego, because then you start to experience separation where there are things. Sure. And you need consciousness to experience these things. But once you go home and you absorb back into the oneness of God, you don't need it. And I was taught that by the Course of Miracles. And in the Indian teachings, they tend to rather disregard that, thinking consciousness is God, and quite understandably. I mean, I read the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda. What a fascinating read. And these yogis, gurus he knows, who kept going off into the astral, you know, and doing amazing things in the astral and all that. But really, the astral, see, this dream isn't just here, it's multi-dimensional. Yeah. You know, and when people pass on, like, you know, like reincarnation and all that, like when they pass on, they go to the astral and think they're in heaven because they think this is real, quite understandably. I used to think it was real until I learned differently. And so they go to this astral where you get this is really common in near-death experience videos, where they go to this astral and some entity in some guise or another talks them into coming back again. They never want to. They always say, I've got to go. No, I don't want to go back. No, you have to. You've got a mission. You have to complete your mission. And they talk them into it and they come back. And then it just goes round and round in circles until they finally go into an incarnation that questions. Because most people don't question. They just accept. You get born, you go to school, you leave school, you get married, you get a job, and then you die, and you get born, you go to school, and you get married. And this goes round and round, and they don't question it.
Yeah.
And religion is here. I mean, I don't like knocking religion. It does its job. But religion is here to promote this kind of thing, like God's looking after you, and do this, or you go and do that, or you go to hell. But that it's not a right belief, but it keeps people under, it controls their belief system. And they think this is real. And so they accept when they're told to come back, even though not one of them wants to, even though they come back, they accept it because these entities convince them that they should. And also, once they, apparently, from what I've learned about this, I mean, this isn't a Course in Miracles. This is stuff a lot from these near-death experience thing. When they go there, there's no sense of negativity, and so they think they're in heaven, and they're not. They're still in the dream because the body's only a dream thing anyway. You leave your body, but you still got your dream mind because the mind is part of the dream as well. It's once it goes out of it, you just become God again. And there's the stuff with angels and that kind of thing. Like in the book, it talks about angels are with you. Now, what all that is, I don't profess to know. Because obviously there's things, once you get in the oneness, there's workings in there that I don't understand, or I probably do, but I've forgotten about, obviously. And it isn't until I get there that I'll understand what these angels are like, but beings of light, I understand. But anyway, whatever they are, they're there in the true afterlife. But in the astral, they're not angels. There's something else. There's lots of theories about it, like the Greeks called them archons, which means rulers. And these entities apparently live off the low frequency vibrations of us. That's why they encourage the wars and all that, because I think it's called loosh. The misery that inflict on us comes out of us, and they live off it because they're low density beings who survive on this loosh stuff. I mean, this is, of course, a miracle stuff I've learned about this astral, And also these beings in the astral. Now, if Yogananda's gurus can get into the astral, and people can astral travel, that's what they mean when they get out of their body and travel in the astral dimension. If the mind is capable of entering the astral while you're still here on Earth, then it must be able to contact it. It must be in touch with it, but not knowingly. Now, when you get these thoughts of guilt from the past that make you cringe, I want to do that for. It might be 15 years ago. You remember some conversation where you said something you wish you didn't. And it comes back to you and you go, oh, I remember I shouldn't have said that. Why does it bother me now? It's 15 years ago. And the person, it's because these, according to, as I see it anyway, these archons, these beings, they go to these so-called Akashic records, which are apparently supposed to store every thought ever thought by any human being who's ever visited Earth. Find stuff in it that you've done that's knowing going to make you upset, which will cause you misery, and just push them into your head. They put it into the astral side of your mind. All these thoughts of guilt, you don't think, oh, I'm going to think that now. They just appear, and you go, oh dear, oh, my, that was God, I wish that was a bad thought, You could be walking down the street, all tickety-boo, and suddenly one of these thoughts enter your mind, some guilty thought from years ago, and you go, oh, God, oh, I remember that. What did I think? Oh, God, that was terrible. Everybody gets this. It's them. And it's the astral side of it, just pushing it in your head to make you miserable so they can get this loosh off you. That's how I understand it. That isn't, of course, a miracle stuff, but it's to do with a multi-dimensional. But this place is, the dream is multi-dimensional, and they're in the astral. I mean, the dream is very, very complex and convoluted in opposition to the simplicity of just perfect love. This directly, as it says in the book, diametrically opposed. The separation, duality, or wholeness, or holiness. With wholeness, it's just play on words, and it's holiness. See, it's exactly opposite. And as a lot of the Indian gurus know, like some of them, like Yogananda and all that, they know that there's just nothing, really. It really is just nothing. The world, there is no world. There is no world. Like, we can compare this to our nighttime dreams. When we're dreaming at night, we think it's real, and then we wake up and realize it weren't. Well, this is the same. While we're here, we think it's real, and when we become awakened, we know it ain't. Except we know that everything's God, rather than sort of like waking up, find yourself in some big bed. It's like you wake up and realize that everything around you is made out of God, including you. Yeah. Everything is God. And you can detect. I made a video about this once. You can detect God by that fact, because everything, the difference between God's world, the oneness, and this world, is that in this world you can give stuff away, whereas in God's world you can't. Like, for example, if I give someone my hat, I no longer have a hat. If I give them anything from this material world, it's no longer in my possession. But if I give somebody happiness or love or joy, I've still got it. If I make someone happy, I don't take it out of me, but there's your happiness. No more happiness for me. I've given it away. You've still got it. Whether you've still got it. If you love somebody, you see the love reflected in their faces, it multiplies.
Mm.
If you give happiness away, not only have you still got it yourself, it's multiplied many times over. And the reason for that is, in the oneness, everything is one. And giving is the same as receiving. Same as having is the same as being. And that's why there's no lack there. You see, it's everything is there.
And
It's
interesting that you should say, in reference to the Advaita and the yogis, say, for example, like a Ramana Maharshi kind of stance
yeah,
would be to say that, for something to be real and true and of God, it needs to be permanent. So therefore, your body isn't permanent. And then
yeah,
they also make the example of the fact that when you're asleep, the body that you occupy when you're asleep isn't permanent, but the awareness that believes or falls into the dream and the trap of being in a dream body or a physical body isn't permanent and fluctuates. So one of the criteria of whether something is real, true or not, or real, is permanence.
yeah. Yes, another way of looking at it. Yeah, permanence. If it's well, truth is truth. I mean, what's true is always true.
Mm,
It ain't truth and then suddenly untrue. What's true is always true. In fact, in this world of opposites, truth is the only thing here that doesn't have an opposite.
mm,
Even God's got an opposite here, and I mean, God's in reality, there's only God, but here, because it's a world of opposites, he has to have an opposite number. This devil business, which some people get tempted to worship, because it's in the material world. There's so many people who think it's all about gaining as much money as possible, and this devil thing sort of like encourages all that, like do this and I'll
mm,
give you money, and they always end up very rich, but they've so not everybody, and very, very few actually, but these Satanists are in it for something to be given to them materially or some kind of physical experience. They're not going to experience any love from Satan because it's the opposite of what God is, here. And he doesn't even exist, let's say. And, it's just something here. But I exist in the dream and you exist in the dream.
yeah.
So presumably Satan does somewhere in the unseen. See, also in this world, you've got the seen and the unseen, because
Mm,
everything here has got an opposite. So if that's the case, there is an unseen, and that's where this so-called devil exists,
mm.
you
Oh, it's
know.
an archetypal sort of blueprint for the ego, really, in Course in Miracles language.
Yeah. And also, what I was going to say, that the only thing that doesn't have an opposite here is truth. It's
Mm,
the only thing that has no opposite,
mm,
because the opposite of it is untruth or illusion. I
mm,
mean, someone might say, well, what about lies? Well, what are lies except an empty? They're not true. They're empty nothingness. Lies are something made up like this. Truth has no opposite. Some would say, well, what about error? Well, what's error? But something that is as it isn't supposed to be.
mm,
Like this is, we ain't supposed to be here. We're supposed to be in heaven or oneness. As it says in the Course of Miracles, this is an error.
mm,
This wasn't supposed to have happened. The tiny mad idea crept into the mind of God, and us aspect like the idea of what of the opposite of me be, but we're the aspects of the dream. God isn't the dream in this. We're the aspects of him
mm,
that are it's like an idea of separation as opposed to his wholeness, and we are the aspects of God exploring that notion, and currently finding out it's somewhat wanting. It's not a great idea. and eventually and eventually when this dream ends, as it will, because everything here has a beginning and an end, including the whole dream, and when it eventually ends, as it says in the Course, that's the end of the dream. Then that's the disappearance of the universe, as Gary Raynaud named his book.
mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and there's nowhere that the Father ends and the Son begins, as the Course says. And another thing the Course says is you can't make truth untrue.
No, you can't. It's either true or it's untrue. And what is true forever. And there's your clue. What is true for eternity. It never reaches a point where it stops being true. It's eternal. Truth is eternal.
And there's the Advaita link again, permanence,
Yeah,
if it,
permanence. Advaita's a great. I mean, I love Advaita. There's a guy called Dennis Waite who wrote a book called Advaita, the Book of One,
mm,
and that is a wonderful book. It's so many, because what I like about Advaita, it gives a lot of analogies about enabling you to understand how this works. Whereas in the course doesn't give any really analogies as such. It sort of like just teaches you a different way. But Advaita teaches through analogies, like
mm,
the snake in the shed. Have you heard of the snake in the shed?
tell me.
It's a it's well, a guy goes to his shed at dusk to get something out of it, a shovel or whatever, and he opens up the door, and there's a great big curled up snake on the floor. So he slams the door shut, runs off to get his neighbours, and they all come back in the dark with their torches and that to sort out this snake and then clubs and all that. And they walk up to these, says, right, stand back, I'm going to open the door. And he throws the door open, and it's a big coiled up
Oh,
rope,
right.
coil of rope,
Yeah.
right? And they'll go, well, where's the snake? Oh, sorry, I thought it was a snake. But anyway, at that moment, while he thought it was a snake, right, when all the time it was a harmless piece of rope, but they all thought it was a snake until a light was shone on it,
Mm,
right? And then they saw it was a piece of rope. And the analogy is this world is actually that snake.
mhm,
It's really that rope.
mm,
Do you get me? It's analogies like that. The world is actually a harmless piece of rope, and the snake is you thinking it's anything different to that.
mm.
They use those kind of analogies. It's
So to bring that back to the Course, that would be like saying that from using the ego thought system, everything reinforces that thought system and represents separation. And then from the Holy Spirit's thought system, the purpose of everything is for forgiveness, so that you can forgive yourself for having this thought of separation and awaken to the reality that you never left God and
That's right. And it's
there's
a
no
basic,
consequence.
that's right. And it's forgiveness in the form of realizing this is just a dream. Because if you're
Mm,
going to go through like all the things that come into your mind, oh, I forgive you for this, I forgive you for that. Like it says about what's generally understood to be forgiveness here is like someone does you a wrong and you go, all right, I forgive you. You don't really, but you just let them off. I'll let you off. I don't really forgive myself. All right, I'll let you off. Forgiveness by knowing it never happened.
yeah.
It never happened. It's a dream. And apply that to everything. And
Mm,
that's why it's important to learn that it is an illusion and everything in it's illusion and nothing has ever hurt you. Nothing has ever upset you. All that's here is the love of God. Forgive everything else because it ain't real, basically. It's marvelous. It's absolutely wonderful. Like, it's so simple because the love of God is so simple,
mhm.
you know.
Because it's truth and it is and it's permanent
It is. It's
and it's
permanently
got
true.
no opposite.
Truth with no opposite.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about your book.
Oh, my book,
Mm,
Truth Connections.
mhm,
What it was, because when in my travels, like I said, if I traveled and I met a lot of people, and
mm,
I met a lot of people because I tend to bump like I was working for people in different places, and they tended to be spiritual people, and I
yeah.
noticed they had the Course of Miracles on their bookshelf, and most of them hadn't read it. They just flicked through it or tried to read it and then give up on it because they couldn't understand the convoluted nature of the way it's written. They just couldn't. They couldn't penetrate it, so they gave up. So I thought, well, my place in this is to try and teach this, learn this so well that I can teach it, make it sound, keep it in a simple fashion to make
Mm,
it understandable to them. And
mm,
I made lots of videos bearing that in mind. And people ask me, like, did I have anything written down? Occasionally, I say, have you got anything written down about this stuff? And I decided to write this book, Truth
mhm,
Connections, an understanding of A Course of Miracles, and it's all full up with stuff that some of it's gleaned, some of it's from the Course of Miracles, some of it's gleaned from examples of Advaita because they give great analogies which connect to it, and it's all about explaining in simple terms the metaphysics of it.
okay.
Because for me, like, look, I was my parents weren't religious. They weren't anti-religious, but they believed, I don't know if they ever believed in God, but it was never discussed. We never went to church or anything like that. God, the church, religion wasn't in our lives. They didn't bother with it. So I never actually got religion until I married my first wife, who was a Catholic. And I had to get married in a Catholic because she wanted to get married in church, and I had to become converted to Catholicism. Well,
Sure.
I didn't get converted. I just got baptized because I remember I went along to the church to be converted. And the priest said to me, what religion are you now, my son? I said, I'm not anything. He said, what do you mean you're not anything? I said, well, I'm not baptized. He wouldn't believe me. He said, no, he said, everybody's baptized, my son. I said, I'm not. He said, you not sure you're not Church of England? I said, I'm not. And he made me get a letter from my mum. So when I go and see my mum, I'm not joking. And my mum wrote me a note saying, my boy Stephen, I hereby certify he's not baptized. So I took it to the priest, and he said, this makes this easy. This makes this easy because now all we have to do is baptize you in the faith and teach you of the ways. And I really got into it to start with. I even joined the choir because it was a 4-part harmony choir, and I'm a musician, like same as yourself. And I just loved the idea. And I even sung the tenor, lead tenor in it, and all that. But after a while, I began to find some holes in what they were saying, and it's sort of like, and one of them, the main one, that really turned. I said, "This God of yours, this biblical God, I mean, God loves us dearly and all that." But he'll quite happily chuck us into a lake of fire if we don't measure up to his very exacting standards. So I thought, well, does he love us or don't he love us? Why would he chuck people he loves into fires and all this smiting and smoting and all that? What's this about? And it sort of put me off. I knew there must be something different. This can't be right. I mean, there's some great parts of it. I love the Jesus stuff. I mean, the Jesus is wonderful, but the other aspects of it, and I thought, this can't be right. It doesn't make sense. And for me to believe in something like that, for me to grasp something, it's got to make sense to me.
Sure.
And the course made sense, metaphysically made sense. Like there's oneness and opposition to duality. I mean, that made perfect sense. And it's like and nothing works out here. Like people say, the world isn't perfect. No, it's not perfect, but it's made up of perfect opposites. And these perfect opposites, what happens in a world of perfect opposites is what's caused all these problems, because there's always conflict. If you've got positive and negative, there's always going to be conflict here, and you can't do anything about that. Whereas in the oneness of God, there's no opposites and no conflict. That's why there's perfect peace. And also there's no time or space there. I mean, here, like this world, I mean, the space is a device to demonstrate that everything is separated. And time is a byproduct because it takes time across this space. Even the electrons buzzing around the neutron in an atom, they're still moving. They're covering a tiny little bit of space, but it's still measurable. Everything here is in motion. Everything's always going somewhere, and this going somewhere takes time to go there. It's a byproduct, an illusion. If there's no space, there's no time, and vice versa. So in oneness, which just goes on to infinity, we can't imagine it, but it has no space. Everything is one. So in no one, there's no space. If there's no space, there's no time. It's as simple as that. And it's this time and space that bring about this existence. Our lives are literally crossing space. The time taken up crossing this space is what our lives are, moving from A to B continually, experiencing different things that are created by the nature of this dream. It's very complex. It's very, very complex. Someone described this before, that if you look at amoebas through a microscope, and they're continually splitting into different cells, splitting. And this is the same. This world continually gets more and more complicated all the time. If someone has an idea, like or an invention or something like that, or anything, it reaches an optimum point, like beginning, it reaches an optimum point. It doesn't stay there. It goes on and on into an extreme where it just destroys itself. Like nothing, like in science, like there's always continued theories about this, and that gets right. No, that weren't right after all. Then this theory, that sounds great. We'll all believe that. Wait a minute, I proved that wrong. Okay, now is another theory. This is right. This is wrong. It just goes on forever. I mean, science is really just the art of making up rules and regulations for a dream. And some they are. I mean, even Newton, Isaac Newton, with his laws of action and reaction and all that. I mean, they're his laws. They ain't God's laws. He's decided what these laws are, didn't he? These laws weren't there in the first place for him to discover. He made them up in order to try and understand what's going on. Rules and regulations.
But we are lucky that he discovered gravity, because otherwise we'd just be floating
We
around.
were just floating around. We would have to wear lead boots. No, even they'd be floating about, wouldn't they? Yeah. Yeah.
So
Good job. Well done, Isaac. What a man.
so
Anyway, just go about my book.
mm,
Yeah, it's like effective self-forgiveness, prayer that works, and finding the source.
why don't you
On
flick it and do like an oracle thing and let the book tell you a page or a paragraph to read us?
well, okay. I've got the introduction, the summary of contents. And I find somewhat a bit shorter. What have we got here? This one. We are Holy Spirit.
Sounds nice.
Uh, this one. This is visions and the illusionary devil. Here are some thoughts about the source and his so-called opposite, the devil. In truth, the source exists and the devil, in opposition, doesn't. The devil isn't real. He exists here in this illusion. His evidence is all around the world. You can read about the evidence of his being here in newspapers and on TV news every day. Seeing as it is all a nightmare anyway, it doesn't really matter. You know those visions of St. John seeing the Virgin Mary at Lourdes and those at Fatima, etc. One interesting thing about those visions is that everybody who sketched or drew the face of the Virgin Mary in those visions sketched the face of a Western woman. Now, bear in mind that not everybody saw this vision of the Virgin Mary, sorry. Not everybody in the crowd could see her, just a great many. They were in a kind of ecstasy. In their subconscious, being very religious, something triggered a mass projection to produce an image of the Virgin Mary outside of them, and they could see it in adoration, which is great, except they were adoring a projection of their own minds. Her appearing to be Western in the drawings shows they were following an image of an icon or even a Christmas card. In church icons and Christmas cards, the Virgin Mary always has a Western face, but she was from the Middle East, so she couldn't have had a Western face. This means they were not seeing the real Virgin Mary. What they were seeing is an image in their mind of what they think the Virgin Mary looks like, conjured up by icons and Christmas cards and the like. The same thing goes for the devil and those that worship him. If enough of them get together, if enough of them get it into their heads, they want to see this behorned, trident-bearing creature, he will appear for them. Then they will give him their worship and do any old stupid thing they think he's commanded them to do. But really, they're just worshipping nothing. Any wealth they may have accumulated for worshipping such an illusionary being is just an illusionary heap of snow. Piles of metal discs, spiritually barren, spiritually impoverished, but with great big piles of metal discs, little sheets of paper, and lengthy rows of zeros on a computer screen. Anything of material value in this world is worth zilch in the spiritual world. This is because, just like our dreams at night, it isn't real, not at all. There's only one reality, and that's oneness, the source. And we're all going to get there. For some reason, however, it's going to take a little longer than others, but we're all going home. Fear not. That's one chat. They're all little, as they get shorter.
Well, you get like, on Amazon, when I was reading about your book and looking at what other people said about it, most people are 5 out of 5 in terms of their response to how helpful and informative they find it.
Well, it's all about clarifying the parts of it that clarifying the metaphysics of it, like an understanding
But
of what it
that's
is
what
like.
you wanted to do, though, for yourself, isn't it? If
Yeah,
the book didn't
I've
exist and there was no other people, that was part of your individual journey, was to clarify it and integrate the metaphysics.
that's right. I mean, that's right. I mean, it's like also in the book. I've got some things here to demonstrate. This is in the book. Like it's like the Big Bang. I mean, this is mentioned in the course, but in a different way. But this is how I describe the Big Bang here. Like if you get this stapler, right now, it takes up a certain amount of space. There's a certain space allocation for this stapler to exist in. This allocation is a bit space. Now, if I get this paperweight And if I was able to, I was able to push it into the same space that the staple's in. Right. This, I've got to mention that this is based on Jesus' story of the mustard seed, where they
Okay.
asked him, what is, heaven is like a mustard seed because everything comes out of it. What did he mean by that? And this is what he meant. You get, so this is just obviously, if I could get this paperweight into the same, occupy the same space as the stapler's in, it would become a new object. It wouldn't be twice the size. If I could get it in there, somehow push it into the same space, it would be a stapler, stone apler or something. It would be a new object. And just so I get this eraser, a rubber, well, actually it looks like a gherkin, but it's actually a rubber eraser. And I could push that into there as well, into the same space. Instead, it occupies the same space as the stapler. Right. Now, if I carry on doing that with the whole universe until I've pushed it all into the same space as a stapler, then crunch it down to the mustard seed, I've got what Jesus was talking about. Now, if I suddenly was to reverse that and dream it, bang, and it opens up and it all floods back out again, there's your big bang. It's the dream in the mustard seed. It's just within it's all within heaven. But the dream of duality causes it to come out and expand like this. You see? Do you get what I'm saying? Like everything's occupying the same space. All that is what I'm talking about there is the big bang in reverse. And then the big bang opens up. I explain it a lot more simply in my book, but that's what it is.
And interestingly, again, you'll hear talk about the expansion of the universe being God's out breath, and then the contraction of the universe being God's in breath. Again, they're sort of Eastern sort of takes on it. It's obviously nothing to do with the Course, because the Course.
Yeah, but it's the same notion, though, isn't it? I mean, this thing I just said it's not in the Course, but it's the same notion. It goes in, then goes out. It goes out and then back into the mustard seed. So when Jesus held up the mustard seed, this heaven is like this mustard seed. Everything is in it.
But the Course really doesn't focus on the world in terms, does it? It's got no history.
It doesn't. Because it doesn't. I think the reason why it doesn't talk about the world is because it will give some kind of solidity to the illusion then.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mention it at all. It's telling you it's all a dream. If it starts discussing points in it, the only point it actually discusses is reincarnation. And then it says reincarnation doesn't exist because it's part of the dream. But should you feel it will help you in your teachings, by all means talk about it. Sure. But that's the only thing I can think of where it actually talks about.
Yeah, and then lesson 132, where he says, the central thought of the entire Course is to say there is no world. It's so that we realize that what is happening, quote unquote, is all just on the level of the mind. It's just a thought, and it'll even say God is an idea. Is another thing it says in the Course, and we're ideas in the mind of God. So it really just wants us to know that the true level of reality of what's going on away from the dream and in the dream is just purely mental activity. It's nothing to do with form and physicality whatsoever. We've just come up with the most protracted and drawn out script for ourselves to just really completely affirm this idea of separation, which is no different to when we are actually asleep. We color our dreams in such a way that we try and convince ourselves that the dream we're having in bed at night is real.
Yeah. And when we wake up, we realize it's not.
Yeah.
Like when we wake up to this, we realize it's not.
That's right.
And also, what we've done is name it. Another thing, we've given everything names.
Yeah.
And once you give a name to something, it sort of pulls it out of the picture. It gives it a kind of reality in the scene. It's like in the book of John, at the beginning, it says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God, and everything was God. But since then, we've named everything. Like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Right, the trees, it's all God. Yep. So that's a tree, that's the bush, that's a flower, this is the grass. Once we start naming things, it gives them a kind of reality. We've gradually forgot that it's all God, really, but really it's all still God. And if we can forget all these names and things we've given anything and see it as the oneness that it truly is, though it's difficult because, like we live in a machine that tells us that it's all separate. Get beyond that. Well, that's where meditation comes in. It's stilling the mind. Stillness, as opposed to the eternal motion of this world, was not eternal, but the ongoing motion of this world. It's meditation to still the mind so much that it stops. And then that's where God you can enter. That's where you can and that's where he can get in because of his
Where you
oneness.
can access it in the moment just by being the stillness and by being the peace. And, I like the fact that you've brought it to that because, I think it's worth us looking at this understanding like Ken Wapnick brought to the table of saying, Leon and Steve, we're not reading A Course in Miracles. Leon and Steve are the characters that our true identity are dreaming up that the Course in Miracles isn't talking to. And, the more you sort of sit and contemplate that and think, well, the I am that is above that identification is absolutely key because that's where the stillness is. And then you're looking at what's looking, which is really,
That's right.
really important.
It's about being aware of the awareness, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, God is an awareness of what's going. It's not giving belief or credibility or anything. It's just an awareness of what's happening. It's like Rupert Spira. He
Yeah.
talks about like it being going to the cinema. Ryogananda's mentioned this as well. It might be where Rupert Spira's got it from. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's great. If you're at the cinema, you've got a single white beam of light. Look up at the beam coming out of the projector. It's just a white beam.
Yeah.
It goes onto the screen, and there's all this action going on. Like you can laugh, cry, grieve, and even get annoyed and get angry about what's going on the screen. But when the picture goes off, it's just a flat screen with nothing happening whatsoever. What was going on was just a sheer projection and you reacting to it. And that's what's happening here. We're projecting this out and reacting to it. There are our own thoughts and our own reactions to it. Like, it also says, I'm the only person here. I mean, I'm looking through my eyes. I'm the only one actually in my world. Really, I'm looking at you and in your world. You're looking at me in your world. I mean, I can like it says in the book, it only takes one person to wake up the whole world. In my world, the whole world will wake up. I can't wake up the other people's world around the other side of the world. They have to wake themselves up there. That's the way I see that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I've got that here. It's like one wholly egoless therapist could heal the world without a word, merely by being there. No one needs see him or talk to him or even know of his existence. His simple presence is enough to heal.
Wow. Wow. Well, I've read of gurus in India where they go to them for advice and they don't actually say anything and they just sit next to them and experience this love coming off these gurus, and they get all they need to know from just sitting next to them. They don't actually hear anything like, well, I think you should do this or do that.
Exactly.
Just be like me. Yeah. And they come out of there totally wow. And it's very similar.
Yeah, which is, for the people who are their minds kind of like operate on a more abstract level, they go for the formless symbol of Holy Spirit. And then people who lean towards a physical symbol, they've got Jesus as the same symbol as the Indian gurus, really, as someone who demonstrated how to just see perfect love in everyone.
Well, he saw it, didn't he? As I understand it, Jesus was the first man who woke up completely and realized he was dreaming. That's when he was hanging on the cross, it didn't hurt him because he knew he was dreaming. In fact, he wasn't even in his body. He was outside just looking at himself hanging there, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And that was easy for him to, how he rose from the dead. I don't go into detail how he did it. Did he make himself a new body or what? Did he just come back to life? It don't matter. But he knew that he wasn't really suffering. He knew it. And that's why he said, forgive them, Father, because they don't know what they're doing. They're still dreaming. I'm not. It's I know what's going on. Like he said to those hanging either side of him, you'll be drinking the sweet wine with me in heaven. Don't worry about this. We'll be all right when we get there, Talking metaphorically, of course.
Yeah. So to further to the quote from a minute ago, it says, to be a teacher of God, it's not necessary to be religious or even to believe in God to any recognizable extent. It is necessary, however, to teach forgiveness rather than condemnation. Even in this, complete consistency is not required, for one who had achieved that point could teach salvation completely within an instant and without a word. Yet he who has learned all things does not need a teacher, and the healed have no need for a therapist. Relationships are still the temple of the Holy Spirit, and they will be made perfect in time and restored to eternity.
Well, that's Christ, isn't it?
It's amazing,
That's
isn't
the
it?
Christ mind. That's the
Yeah.
Christ mind.
But I mean, if
That's
we break that down and look at the bit where it says, to be a teacher of God, it's not necessary to be religious. We've talked about that,
yeah.
or even to believe in God to any recognizable extent. I mean, I love
Well,
that.
well, God is only a title, isn't it? It's the same like you have to here we have to put a name onto something to give some kind of understanding of what it is you're talking about. God, oh, I know what you mean.
Mm.
Whereas God is actually nothing.
Yeah.
He isn't anything.
Mhm.
And like they said, God just is, and He's in that little empty space following the is. God is that. The
Yeah.
God is,
Yeah.
and
And then coming back to the course, what you were saying about giving names to things and how that reinforces the notion of separation. And in the course, when it says something like, the broken pieces don't mean anything, and he sort of points to the fact that the totality of Christ is in every single part, and unity, it says, unity alone is not a thing of dreams. And I talk about a mic drop moment, if you
yeah,
chatter, blah, 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 blah. And so unity alone is not a thing of dreams. Because in the course, we'll say, this course will either be believed entirely or not at all. It's like, okay, so then let's just take one tiny little bit from the whole course, like you just said, God is, and we cease to speak. Or, unity alone is not a thing of dreams. So that's telling us that's the one only thing in all of the dream that's not of the dream, which is the unity, which is why he says, the broken pieces themselves don't mean anything. And that ties in with like William Blake, with like, eternity in an hour and holding a grain of sand in your hand. And
yeah, I love Blake. Blake was a genius. He was a genius, Blake. Yeah,
that's
he
that's
was.
the same deal. It's like the
Yeah,
totality of Christ is in every part, and the broken pieces don't mean anything because unity is the only thing that's outside
and
of the dream.
yeah, that's right. And the broken pieces being everything around us, where it's all broken into bits. I mean, really, everybody and everything in the entire universe is made out of God, so to speak. The illusion is thinking it's anything different to that,
Mm.
really. And it's not nothing, it isn't different to that. Everything is made out of God. I mean, but even to say everything, because he isn't anything, but in order to try and get your point across, you have to you have to use wordplay to describe this, because trying to describe the indescribable when all you've got is words. So you've got to try and do a bit of juggling about with them. But it is true. Everybody and everything in the entire universe is made out of God. The illusion is thinking it's anything different to that. And you just have to sort of get that understanding, you know.
Yeah, I love that. That's really nice. So let me have a look at my notes. So yeah, and again, that ties into talking about looking at who's looking. We've talked about the radical standpoint in terms of merging this non-dualistic stance with the Christian terminology. And yet, when we think back to Bill Thetford and Judy talking about the course being essentially Eastern, in its sort of in its framework, I guess.
Yeah,
And something such as, look at how much emphasis there is on I am not a body, I am free
I'm
in the
still
book.
as God created me. Yeah,
I mean, isn't that the thing that gets repeated the most in the workbook? I'm not a body, I'm free.
free.
And think
For I am
about,
still as God created me. Yes, it is. I am not, but I am free.
yeah,
Yes.
and think
It
about that in Eastern terms, because I mean, Advaita just means not to, as far as I understand it. If we were
does it.
to,
I don't know what the word means. Does it mean that?
no,
Not to. Well, that makes a lot. That
it's
makes
not
sense.
to.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
in a sense, it just means it focuses on no attempt to define what is. It's more an emphasis on to define what is not. So again, put that into course speak and say, this course doesn't aim at teaching what love is, because the meaning of love is forever beyond words. But it does aim at teaching you about the interference to the awareness of love's eternal presence. So
Well,
it's a manual. It's like, it's a waking up manual so that you can rouse yourself from this dream of separation. Um, but it's not focused. I mean, like we said earlier, there's nothing about the course that's telling you about the world. It's not reinforcing anything about the world, but equally, it's also not reinforcing what's going on outside of the dream, because it's far too on point to sort of focus on that. It'll give us the things like the changeless dwelling place, the quiet center. It will make metaphorical suggestion of just eternal peace beyond form.
right.
It says God knows not form. Mind is pure abstraction. Mind reaches to itself. There's nowhere the Father ends and the Son begins. All of these things which give you this love just extends and light just extends forever.
Mm.
So you can go, oh, okay, but you're still only going, okay, from a relative standpoint, because we're relatively contemplating the absolute, and we can't understand the absolute from a relative position. But at least relative contemplation is one step closer than being consumed by concepts, which again, a massive, massive part of the course is like salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. And what does that tell you? It's like that salvation, so the freedom of all of the bullshit and getting out of the dream, is nothing more than the escape from concepts. And concepts are frameworks and limitations. And
Ideas.
interestingly, yeah, and also like going back to what you were saying about naming everything, there is this recognized point in our conscious evolution as beings where our parents, where we wake up as kids kind of thing, and we start to identify all the different things around us that as a small baby we just saw everything as one, and we didn't know that there was a table and that was sitting on a carpet in front of a wall by some curtain. We just saw this one great big thing. And then they have a phase in our cognitive development which they call object permanence. And it's basically the best way to explain it would be if you were playing with a child and you had a cushion and you had a small little teddy bear or something, and you have that phase in a child's cognitive evolution where once the teddy bear's behind the cushion, it just simply does not exist in their world because they can't see it. And then as they get a bit older and their brain starts to develop, then they get to that point where they want to pull the cushion down because they now know that the teddy bear is just simply behind the cushion. And that's known as object permanence in the cognitive sciences, where you've got to that point where you're retaining something mentally that's outside of your field of vision, because you're
Yeah.
now naming. Not only are you naming stuff that you can see, you're now naming stuff that you can't see.
Exactly. You're expanding on expanding, calling it names. Like you start like everything becomes a different world.
Yeah,
And the fact that it's just oneness, it's actually even though it's unity, but you forget the unity and it becomes broken into bits, as I said before, into bits which we name. And it seems to make a kind of sense, a sense that this machine, biological machine with its onboard computer can understand. And that's our understanding of the world, isn't it? You see, this is really is a difficult thing. Like up until now, I think the course come about around this time is because people are being born more questioning now. You know, people are tending to question a lot more than they did before. Like, you know, they were led astray by religion to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, people are questioning it. And also I think, tell you what's something that's that these computer games that are coming about now, recent last 50 years. I remember the first computer game, like when they come in pubs, they were like a thing called ping pong or something. You had a little dial, and this little bat went up and down, and this ball went backwards and forwards, and that was a computer game. And look at them now.
Yeah.
And where are they going to be sooner or later? Eventually, they're going to be three-dimensional and all sorts of things, the way they're advancing. But they are becoming like a kind of how the world is. You know, they're working, they're not real.
Mm-hmm.
Like the only real person in a computer game is the person who's playing it, right? And he plays the game how he wants to play it, see if he can win it or not. Until this is like a game, right? You come in this world, right, and it's a world of lies because nothing is true, and you're continually being led astray. Then you die, and then you come back again another go, like a pinball machine, more balls, fire, keep firing your balls. You keep coming back, another life, another life, another life, until you realise the objective of the game is to find the truth in a world of lies. You're given no instruction book. You just dropped in it, right, find the truth. And it takes many, many, many lifetimes, as it says in the book. Like sometimes this will, no, occasionally it says, learn this and you will save you thousands of lifetimes.
God, yeah.
You know, until we eventually reach an incarnation that questions enough. And I think that a lot of people now, enough people are being born on the earth. I mean, I was told I was an indigo child, and I've done some investigation into that, and I believe I am because all the criteria for an indigo child, I am what that is.
Right.
You know, and I'm here for a reason. I'm absolutely certain of that because when I got the course, I knew that was what I'm here to do, and I've devoted myself to it without, and I'll do it until I leave here. You know, and it's
Interesting you should say about the life, you know, that how long it can take, because again, using some of the Eastern metaphors, I know one of them is like picture a wooden ring that's floating on the oceans of the earth, and somewhere under the water there's a turtle swimming around, and you know, the odds of him popping his head up
through the ring.
through the ring is a metaphor of, like, you know, what's stacked against you to develop over lifetimes. And also there's one about flying over a mountain with a silk scarf. I think it says something like you
Oh yeah,
fly,
go on.
yeah, you fly over a mountain every 100 years with a silk scarf, and it brushes on the mountain slightly.
And it eventually wears it away. Is that it?
Eventually, yeah.
And when you've worn it away, you get it.
Yeah.
Well, I think looking on, yeah, it's that difficult, and it actually says without this course, without someone to show you, it's highly unlikely you will ever find your way out of here. You know, and of course, it's like, okay, you've been playing a game for so long, you've been trying to find the truth, because most people don't even realize there is a truth. They think the world of lies is it. The Course in Miracle appears. I mean, in the Eastern world, they've a couple of thousand years they've been looking for the truth, but in the Western world, it's been suppressed very badly. And the Course in Miracles have been introduced as an instruction book. Here's a manual. This will show you how to get out of there. And it actually says in the book, like, you know, without this book, you know, you could be stuck here forever. Well, there's no forever really, but it certainly seems like it, doesn't it? You know, it will seem like it, thousands of a lifetime. Even though thousands of lifetime, it's all happening at once, really, isn't it? Because there's no past or future. They're just ideas. All these past lives are happening now at this same time. I'm living any past lives I may have had or any future lives I got right at this moment. You know.
Yeah, that's why, as you mentioned earlier, about the way that they, you know, really gently but firmly talk about reincarnation. It's like ultimately none of these lives happened. So it's a no, but if it helps you, it's a yes, you know. And then again, what you said about space and time, and we know that space and time don't exist because they're
It's
dream
part of the
qualities.
dream.
Then that's when you get in the course where it says, you know, you're reviewing mentally. what's already happened. It's
what's already happened.
yeah.
And also with reincarnation, I think for me, it's been sort of important to talk about reincarnation. I mean, I know you don't have to talk about it because
Mhm.
most people, when they think about afterlives, they say, well, what happens when you get, like when I go there and see my old granny? That's another point. If you go to an afterlife and everything's still separated,
Mm,
it's still in the dream of separation, isn't it? You're not home until you're in the oneness.
sure.
You know, and I believe it's a multi-dimensional dream, and I don't know how many dimensions there are. So in the 70s, a woman called Jane Roberts, I've read her book, Seth, The Validity, Eternal Validity of the Soul. She channels this entity called Seth,
Yeah, I
who
know
gives
about this.
really, do you know that book's a fascinating read?
There's a
And he
whole
just,
series, isn't there? There's a whole
yeah,
thing built up
well,
around.
I've only read the one, but the stuff in that's enough. And he talks about these illusions, the multi-dimensional afterlives, like they're a kind of a fairground, and
Mm,
there's all sorts of rides, like and this is just one of the rides.
mhm,
I'm not too sure about that myself, bearing the course in mind, because it talks about separation. It doesn't talk about other afterlives, but when
mm,
he describes these other afterlives, everything's still separated in it,
mm.
you know. But I don't think it's only this one, apparently, where they have this kind of wars and all these other really extreme negativity exists only in this one, according to
Very
him.
low density.
Very, very low density,
Yeah.
or
And
high density.
the ego,
But
if you think of the ego's maxim of seek and do not find, and
yeah,
again, come
yeah,
back to the ego. Don't think of the ego as like some solid entity that takes over you. It's simply a thought system, an erroneous thought system that you drop into using as your operating system for your mind. It's not real. It's just something that when you're when you're not aware of what you're doing, you use this thought system, and then when you are aware of it, you come back. And the way that it works is like going back to the thing from earlier of saying, looking at who is looking, being aware that Leon isn't reading A Course in Miracles. I, the I am that is watching Leon read A Course in Miracles is the true aspect of my being, which needs to remember and awaken from this notion of dreaming. And attention is something that's almost like could say like a currency, just for the sake of conversation. So if I give my attention to anything outside of myself, that act and whatever it is that I give my attention to reinforces the fact that I have got an identity, a separate identity in this body that's surrounded by elements that are divided into many different parts. And then the other side of that currency is to give my attention, like we spoke about earlier, to meditation, to the silence, to the peace, to what he calls the quiet center or the changeless dwelling place as a counterpoint. And that identification, that sort of development of like the familiarity is what starts to put you in this place where you go, when you're going through the contemplation of going, okay, so Leon isn't reading A Course in Miracles. What does that mean? And you actually put that into motion with your attention internally to just like being, to just feeling the peace and the happiness and the love, which are qualities of just simply
mm,
being, of awareness, internal attention. Or again, going back to your Advaita stuff, just self-inquiry is one of the terms that they used to like to use, is just self-inquiry. And then that's the complete opposite of the ego, seek and do not find. So if I'm going to seek and do not find, the best place to do that is to look in the wrong
look.
place, which is in the world.
Well, but it's like the old thing about God sitting on a throne up in the clouds. You're looking outside yourself for God. God is within the mind. I mean, the thing when I first read the course, they kept saying God is within. You tend to think he's in the heart, sort of thing, but there is no heart. He's in the mind. When he says within, it's within the mind. That's what he means.
Mm,
The idea, as far as I understand it, the idea of intuition seems to come from the stomach, a gut feeling. See, intuition seems to come from the heart. But I
Mm.
think what that originally means, like when the ancients spoke about the heart being the intuition, is because they meant the center of the body, the heart of it, the center of it, in the gut where where intuition is. Intuition, as I understand, like every people are born with an inbuilt sense of right and wrong about this game that is the world. I'm not
Mm.
saying it is a game, but it's like you've got a kind of an inner guide that sometimes, when it's something you think, something's telling me this is wrong
Sure.
without any real reason. Something is telling you. I don't know if that's to do with spirit guides or anything like that. They're saying the angels are with you. I suppose they're guides, sort of thing, if that's the case. But since when I started studying the course and I realized that love is all, I decided, like, okay, if we got positive and negative, you can either like people or dislike people. Well,
Mm.
don't dislike anybody,
Mm.
just like them. And if
Mm.
they don't like you, well, then the point is, like, if you don't, people like people who like them,
Mm.
right? Now, if you like somebody, they're not going to dislike you. Like, it's just spreading the like reflect. If you, as it says, what you project out of you is what you see.
Mm.
If you like somebody, then they will like you back, because your like is projecting back at you. And if you love somebody, when I go out, I don't do it all the time, because might be preoccupied with something else, but most of the time, when I'm out, everybody I see, I bless them.
Sure.
I say, bless you, brother, bless you, sister, bless you, bless you, bless you, because I bless them because they are me.
Mm.
And I put these blessings out, and I
Yeah.
just
Same.
love doing that.
Same.
I
Yeah.
just look for the good in, yeah, same. It's great, isn't it? It's great. I mean, it's the way to a happy life, is just to love everybody. I mean,
Mm.
it's not a case of running up to them going, "Oh, buddy," but you just love them.
And I like
Love
it.
is all.
Love is all beautiful. I like if I see someone at a bus stop, if I see someone carrying heavy shopping, or if someone, then then I love you. I love you, and I like the fact that they can't see me, and they're not looking at me, and we're not having this conversation in the world of form. I'm looking at them and I'm going, I love you. God loves you. And I had this experience in the summer, and I was driving home from work one day,
Yeah.
and all these cars were going past me, hundreds and hundreds of cars with men and women and children, and a man and a woman, two men, with somebody from African origin, someone with a Western origin, someone with Eastern origin,
Mhm.
and all I could see was one identity in all these, and it was so emotional. I'm driving along, just like I could just see the one face of Christ in all of these
Wow.
quote unquote differences. And I got to the supermarket, and it was just like it's probably like a 10 or 15 minute drive, and I just had to sit in the motor for a little while and just think, oh my God, I've just seen the one face. It was so powerful. And then I went into the supermarket, and it carried on, and it was like a tall person and a short person, and a big person and a small person, and all of those differences were just not even there, and I could just see this one identity in everything, and it was just,
You saw through the illusion. You saw through it.
yeah.
You saw through the illusion and saw the love that was there as one.
Mm.
Me and my wife were waiting outside a steakhouse for it to be called into our table, and the people were coming out the restaurant. And in my mind, I'm going, bless you, bless you. And an African American very old lady come walking out, and as I said, bless you, she stopped and looked at me and said, thank you. And and she just carried. I said, that old lady. My wife said, what? I said, I just blessed her in your mind. She turned around and said, thank you. So well, honestly, I thought that's what she picked up on it. She somehow picked up on it. She turned around, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Thank you." And I didn't say it. I thought it.
God, I
You
love.
know, it's wonderful. It's absolutely, once you grow, it's quite simple, really. In a world of positive, negative, God is love, and
Mm.
negative is hate, if you like. Well,
Mm.
just love everybody, and then you're close to God. The more you love, the closer to God you are. It might not be his perfect love, but it's hanging on his coattails, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's getting there.
Yeah, I think there's something very like valuable for me is like and people watch the podcast will know that I use the scientific term reductionism, where you've got X amount of scenarios and you're whittling it down to, like you were saying earlier, just truth. What is truth? And like we said about the the definition of reality from the Eastern perspective of what's permanent, and the Zen thing of like chop wood and fetch water. What do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood and fetch water. What do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood and fetch water. There is, for me, there's like this contemplation, there's this process of like
Ah, yeah,
developing like a familiarity with the true I am. So using the currency of my attention with self-inquiry, and to sit and to familiarize myself with the stillness and the silence and what's looking. And then I have this sense of like, okay, then what? And by that, I don't mean a journey in. I don't mean that I'm expecting something in the future. I think then what, from a now point of view. So if I say to myself, the atonement, the undoing of what never was. Okay, that's one description that's used in the course. The journey without distance. We're reviewing mentally something that's already gone by. The separation never occurred. All of this stuff is like someone with a megaphone just shouting the
yeah.
same thought at you from all these different angles. And then I come back to this, okay, then what? So then what, be in this world, but not of this world. And another thing that I've been repeating recently is what probably one of my favorite things in the course, where he says, in laughter and lightness is sin gone, because its quaint absurdity is seen.
Mm,
Just laughter
lovely.
and lightness, into eternity where everything was one, there crept a tiny mad idea, where the Son of God remembered not to laugh. Really low key, just like when you're thinking of what you were telling me about your Catholic experience and stuff, and all
Yeah,
that, oh, I'm not worthy, and whoosh, and like
yeah,
carrying the weight of the world, and you'll never be
yeah.
good enough, and God's angry. Here's a thing I found in the course today that made me laugh. God's not angry.
Yeah, I
tiny,
wouldn't know what it meant.
tiny
It's a
little sentence. God is not angry.
not angry.
4 words. And I was just laughing my head off.
Love it.
Isn't that brilliant?
What I tell you, that went in it, they crept into the God's mind a tiny mad idea,
Mm,
and you remembered not to laugh.
mm,
It took me a while to grasp that actually what that, because it's written in Shakespearean pentameter, isn't it? Like it's very Shakespearean, the
mm,
writing.
mm,
Now he remembered not. It's like the way Shakespeare would put it in any of his plays. Alas, I remembered not, which means I forgot.
mm,
And in his forgetting, that's I remembered not to laugh. I remembered not to laugh. And
mm,
in his forgetting, he became, well, the thing is like, once you realize that this dream is wonderful, if you still remember it's all made out of God,
mm,
you remember not like the absurdity of it, everything's split into opposites. Like when you're used to a wholeness, it would be a ridiculous thought,
mm.
but you forgot to laugh at it and began to think it was real. And once you began to think it was real, it became terror. It opened you up to the terrors such an idea can hold. And
So let's tie a couple of those things together then. So what you're saying there, what we're saying about the course not focusing on the world of form, and then your example of, and something that I do too, where we're blessing people as we're moving amongst them. And then that, that is the laughter and the lightness of like not taking the dream seriously, being in the world but not of the world,
yeah,
where you
not
are
taking it seriously.
demonstrating. And then let's come back to those couple of quotes earlier. One wholly egoless therapist could heal the world without a word, merely by being there. No one needs see him or talk to him or even know of his existence. His simple presence is enough to heal. So if you're waiting outside a steakhouse, or if I'm driving home in my van and we're just looking at people going, "I love you, I bless you, I love you," that in that moment we are egoless, because we are not acknowledging the opposite, the thought of separation. We are just extending love, and we're doing it without a word, merely by being there. The other people didn't need to see us or talk to us or even know that we existed. And our simple presence is enough to heal, to just bring light to the table and bring love to the table. But how much work is involved in that? You know, you explained your history with your wife. People know about my backstory with my dad and things like that, that we had to like remove that interference and get to the love.
Get to the love beneath it, get to the love beyond it. It's
Mm,
like when I first come across the course, I knew my fair share of argumentative and unreasonable people,
mm,
you know. But as I progressed with it, they either disappeared out of my life or become more reasonable people. You know, they stop being so obnoxious or whatever the word might be. But I
yeah.
realized later on that they hadn't changed. I had.
Mm,
You know, the people that the angry people just vanished out of my life because I wasn't projecting anger anymore.
mm,
You know, as it vanished, because I realized anger's pointless. You
mm,
know, it's okay to get annoyed. It says in the book, it's okay to get annoyed about things, but don't hold on to it,
mm,
because it's difficult to go through a world like this and stay not annoyed at something. You know,
mm.
if something happened, like somebody stole something off you, of course you're going to get annoyed. I I got a there was a great example. This happened to me a few years ago. I was sitting in the yard, the garden. They called it the yard here, and they had the bird bath. We got 5 bird baths out of it. I love nature. I love sitting out in the yard, you know. And I was watching a robin, American robins, which are different to British robin. That's beside the point. This robin was in the bird bath having a bath, and a flock of grackles flew in. Their grackles are like, they're kind of like blackbirds, but they're very aggressive and noisy. A
Mm.
flock of them flew in and kicked him out of the bird bath. Right? And he flew up on a fence and flew onto a post, and he glowered. He glowered at these grackers like, you know, he'd been kicked out in the middle of his bath and he was really annoyed. And I didn't know birds had such expressive faces. And I thought, look at him, he's really, really, you know, he's really fed up. And then the grackles flew off and he got in the bath and he carried on. And I thought, wait a minute, the bird was obviously annoyed, but
Mm.
he wasn't being evil, would he? How could you say the bird was being evil? Of course he was annoyed. He's just been kicked out of his bath. If I
Mm.
was in my bath and some people come in and chuck me out of it, I'd be annoyed about it. But I wouldn't. But the great, but the great example the bird set. Once the grackles went, he got back in the bath and carried on. I don't suppose he spent the rest of his bird life being annoyed about grackles. He must have just forgot about it. And to me, that was an example. It's okay, as it's in the book, it's okay to get annoyed, but just let it go. Let
Brilliant.
it go.
Brilliant.
You know, I mean, birds can do it, so can I. You know, yeah,
Wow. So, yeah, beautiful. I think we've managed to like create a lovely little circle there, because all of the different elements that we were talking about resurfaced, didn't they? And came
yeah.
back. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'll tell you one more thing that
Yeah.
I got this
Okay.
idea from Advaita, actually, from an
Mm,
idea by Dennis Wade, who didn't actually follow the idea through, but I realized this. He's got this thing where ask somebody if they can speak Chinese. No, obviously you don't ask a Chinese person because you want them to say no, all right? Say, can you speak Chinese? No. Well, when did your ignorance of Chinese begin? And they're going to say, what are you talking about? I've never been able to speak Chinese. Then you say, well, if you was to learn Chinese, your ignorance of Chinese would end, wouldn't it? Yes. Well, how could something end that's never had a beginning? So that seems, because in this world of opposites, if it's got an end, it must have had a beginning. So how could his ignorance of Chinese end when it never had a beginning? Now, this is very abstract. This is, he must have known it in the first place for it to end. So when did he know it? He knew it when he was back in the oneness where everything is known. The logic of that is undeniable, but it's so abstract. But
wow.
it's so abstract, it's difficult to grasp at first. But when you think about it, it's peculiar, that is really. But It
Yeah, I think
works.
you should say that again.
Yeah. You
Run.
ask somebody if they could speak Chinese,
Hmm.
and when they say no, you say, well, when did your ignorance of Chinese begin? And they're going to say, what are you talking about? I've never been able to speak Chinese. Well, you say, well, okay. So if you learn to speak Chinese, your ignorance of Chinese would come to an end, wouldn't it? They say, yes. Well, how could something come to an end that never had a beginning? Right. So they're going to say, well, when did I learn? When did I know Chinese then? You knew it when you were still in the oneness of God, where everything is one and everything is known. Right. Now, that is curiously abstract, but undeniably true.
That is so good.
You see?
Wow.
It's a logical explanation that oneness must exist. Yeah.
Well, I'm really, really grateful for your take on things. I really enjoy your videos, and
But it's,
it's nice that there's obviously an element of the fact that we're both from England, and there's probably um, a perspective that's easy for us to share from our sort of DNA and our origins. But
yeah.
yeah, I do really appreciate your angle, and like I said, my wife absolutely loves you, and
Well,
because
tell her I love her back. I mean, I'm full of love, man. I love my wife and I love you. And I honestly love everybody. I've got no time for anything else. I love everything. I really do. And I know. So I love that you've asked me to come on the show and I really do appreciate it. I really do. And after this, I shall sit lovingly on my chair, thinking lovingly of this show. I will. I've had a great
well,
time. I've had a great time.
Luigi was very insistent that I get you on. Stephanie and Lloyd were wonderfully helpful because, like a lot of people, I've missed your presence on Facebook, and it's like Stephanie helped us to connect via email.
That's right.
And
If they ever let me back on, I mean, I'm not. They're not having my driving license. I'm not sending them
never,
my idea driving license.
never
You
heard
know.
the like, mate. It's bizarre.
No. So if they're, I talk every day on there daily for 10 years, and I miss the people on there. I do, but I might log back in sometime and see if they put me back on. But occasionally I ask friends to see if they put me back, and they haven't so far. But they never gave me any clear reason why they kicked me off in the first place. And one
Mm.
thing that might be because they've handed it over to, it's run by AI now, artificial
Mm.
intelligence. They've handed it over to that. And I think it might have made a mistake or something. They might have
Mm.
programmed it wrong because all I ever talk about is God and music, So unless they've got some objection to that, I don't know why they booted me off. Anyway, but I'm on TikTok and I'm on Rumble and I've got my YouTube channel, Stephen Dean Truth Connections.
Yeah.
My TikTok is Truth Connections 1 and 2. There's two of them. Rumble is Truth Connections. And my X one is just Stephen Dean. Stephen Dean, 9,900, what is it? 99715. Yeah,
Well, I
that's
should
me.
put your YouTube channel in the description, and yeah, your books on Amazon. I've seen, like I
Yeah,
said,
it's on there. Barnes and Noble and all that. It's I don't my book, I don't I think Amazon sells it for about $15. I mean, I only get $4.50 per book. I don't make a fortune out of this tool, and I didn't write it to make money out of it. I wrote it to clarify for anybody who might want to have the metaphysics of it clarified. This is what this book's about. You should be able to pick it up cheap. And there's even people who pirated it. You probably get it for nothing if you go to the right sources. If you Google Stephen D. Truth Connections book, loads of things come up, and it's in book clubs and all sorts of things. And when it goes into a book club, they just join the club and read it through Kindle. So I sell one or two a month, but I like to only make $4.50 out of it. The Kindle I make sort of like $3 or something, but I'm not in it for the money. It's
in it for the love.
it's there to help people understand the metaphysics. Yeah, Truth Connection, Stephen Dean. There it is.
Well, what a brilliant title, Truth Connections. And yeah, what a lovely conversation. I'm really grateful for our connection.
I am, brother, and I hope to see you again sometime.
Yeah, likewise. Be well.
Be well, my brother. I'll see you again.
Take care.
Take care. I'll see you. I shall leave the green. I don't ever find out how to leave them. I see you. Bye.
Bye bye.